Okay, formally, thank you, everyone. Welcome once I don't know why I say thank you. I was just gonna say welcome. My brain is a little off, I guess, as usual. In any case, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here and joining us for this workshop. Today we have Jennifer Estevez, who's going to be presenting storytelling. She's going to be guiding us of how to tell the story of our businesses. So just a little bit of background about Jennifer. She is CEO and entrepreneur and also a business advisor with many years of experience working in the marketing, communications, and food and beverage and hospitality. She started her career as a sommelier at different Michelin star restaurants and transitioning into the marketing and communications by creating her own firm, Ovino. And after seeing the opportunity that she can also share like her knowledge with other entrepreneurs. So she also at the same time that she developed this startup. She co-founded an online wine app that is called Palette Club, and she grew both companies simultaneously. So she gained a lot of knowledge and experience while doing so, and then she decided to keep sharing those with other brands and startups. In 2020, she took she did a deep shift in her life and decided to bring her personal life from being a vegan and being into the wellness industry. I mean, not industry, practicing wellness, in bringing that into her businesses. And now she focuses on plant-based and sustainable startup. And on her free time, she teaches yoga, meditation, breath work, and lead wellness retreat. Thank you, Jennifer, for being with us. And I'm just going to pass it on to you. I'm going to stop sharing so you can also speak.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you, Maybelline, for the introduction. And I'm so excited to be here with all of you ladies this morning. I love that we have a room full of ladies for the presentation today, and excited to dig more into brand storytelling with you and just get into the nuts and bolts of a process that has taken me years to develop and many brands that I've worked with. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up my presentation. One second. All right. So brand storytelling. So telling the story of your brand is one of the most important things that you can do as a business person, because telling the story of your brand ties into literally everything else that you're doing. It ties into the people you're connecting with. It ties into how you're going to visibly represent your brand. And it's actually one of the most important things that we need to do to reach our audience when we're selling a product or service, or even just, trying to get noticed as a person in the world of business. So before I dig a little bit deeper into this presentation really quickly, Maybelline, did you have a chance to send the document to people?
I'm just going to drop it in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you. So everybody, you'll see here a document that is your homework document. And so this is what we'll be going over in our next session. And I would just love for you to have this open in front of you as you're listening to this presentation. And I would love for you to just take any notes and have any thoughts that come up for you about what I'm talking about. Just jot them down either directly online or in a notebook, and just kind of get your brain juices going and get yourself kind of in tune with this whole process here, because we're going to walk through this process step by step. And then we're going to also see an example of a client that I've recently worked with, which is a plant-based food company, a vegan carrot lox, and just see some examples of what this process looks like. And yeah, then we're going to have you do it on your own and get as much of it done as possible. And we're going to regroup in our next session and just talk about it. So does anybody have any questions so far to start off with? Awesome. Okay. So When defining your brand story and understanding how to tell your brand story, one of the first things that you really need to do is you need to locate yourself. So, in order to understand how you're going to tell your brand story, you need to reflect and start asking critical questions. So, where are you? What are you doing? What are you making or offering, for who and why? And so understanding yourself and kind of locating yourself and where you are in your process, again, it serves the purpose of understanding, who you are targeting right now, what you're doing and offering, just understanding how you're going to position the brand in the market. And so these critical steps all start with understanding yourself and really knowing where you are in the process and being honest about, even in the beginning of your business, who are you going to target? Because it's always going to shift a little bit, right? Over the course of your business, it's going to shift, how you're targeting people, who you're targeting, like right now, for example, if you're a small local brand, the who and what of what you're targeting, you're going to be going to, let's say with your food products, small farmers markets. You're not going to be targeting like Costco. It's a very different environment. So you really need to take stock of where you are in the process of building your brand, and just, get all of this kind of listed in one place to really start the juices flowing. So thinking about, where are you? Are you pre-seed, which means, are you like pre-revenue? Are you, in development of your product? Just kind of list it out, sketch it out, and get yourself an idea of where you are location-wise, like in your process. And then I want you to think about what challenges you're facing. What right now is something that is influencing your brand that you need to understand and take into account. So are you getting ready to fundraise? Are you, still not sure of your identity? Do you not have enough time for your brand? All of this, believe it or not, is super relevant to your storytelling and just understanding yourself and where you are. So next, depending on where you are in your process, even if you do have a product, you really need to find a way to define what it is you are creating. You need to be able to explain it as simply and as clearly as possible. And, some of these questions might seem redundant, but I just want you to know, again, they're for you to begin internalizing and seeing the different parts of your story from different angles. So as you're thinking about what you're creating, begin to think about what is it that your product or service offers to people. How is it something that's unique? And moving more deeply into defining your why. Why do people need your product and service? And why is it that someone should choose your product or service over another? Why is it unique? So these are all really important things to think about. And this ties directly into understanding your audience, which is also a critical part of brand storytelling, which we're going to go into a little bit later in this process. So next, defining your who. Who is buying your product? And how can you put yourself in their shoes and really begin to think about your needs? Really begin to think about their needs, rather. What physical or emotional reason do they need your product? What is it that they're searching for when they're buying your product? How can you really get into the details and just be the person that you're selling to? A lot of people create products that are, in some ways for themselves to solve a need for themselves, like I've worked with companies, for example, who are a, gluten-free baking company with like very minimal additives because the founder had like celiac and was, allergic to nuts. And so they wanted to make like allergen-free, upcycled like flours and different products. So, when you are creating a product, if it's for you, think about also how does it connect to other people? So one of the clients that we're going to talk about a little bit today is a client that I worked with recently called Love Locks. And so this is a vegan carrot lox, and the founder, Nicole, has a really incredible founder story. And, she's a vegan celebrity chef. And so I wanted to just use this as an example to kind of show you how you can define and storytell not just for your brand, but also for yourself as a person, and how important that is as a founder of the company to, put yourself in as part of the brand. Some founders don't choose this, but I think it is something important to touch on, even if it's just because you're creating a founder bio. One of the next classes that we're doing is related to public speaking and pitching. So it's really important when you're thinking also about public speaking and pitching to understand that, that means that you have to tell your story too. And you're going to have to make it all a neat little package where everything kind of rolls together. Okay. So one of the next things to define when you are working with just understanding your guiding principles, understanding where you are in this whole process is what really connects you to your business. What is your guiding light? What is the deep purpose of your brand? One of the things that's really important to consider, which I'm sure all of you know as people who are building companies or have already started them, business ownership is hard. And similar to asking yourself why you're creating this brand for other people, as you write your story, you really need to get clear about why you are creating this brand for you. And then again, how does that translate out into other people? And this guiding light is really one of the things that will help keep you grounded when you go through the ups and downs of running a business. It's something that, if you don't have clearly defined for yourself, some days you're going to feel more inclined to give up. This is kind of just like a really important point of focus for this whole process. So circling back in on Lovelocks, for example, again, this particular client is very mission driven and very oriented towards, wanting to provide people with nourishing, whole food, plant-based food. One of the things that she was really excited about was creating a whole food, plant-based alternative to salmon that also has a similar omega profile to, real salmon. So it actually provides like health benefits as well as delicious, flavorful, like taste and texture. And so one of the things that's important for her, not just the health experience, is, creating a product that feels nourishing and experiences for people that are positive with relation to whole food plant-based, with a whole food plant-based product. And so the element of human connection and compassion for her was really important as well, as the way she was cooking and making the product. She really didn't want to have any, she didn't want to cut any corners. And so there was also the element of expressing creativity and passion through the art of food. And, she's in this really for the purpose of bringing people into a more healthy lifestyle, as well as allowing for more animals to be, animal lives to be preserved, because she's creating an alternative for something that doesn't really have a lot of alternatives out there quite yet. So this is just an example of her North Star or her guiding light. So moving forward, as we have asked ourselves these key locating questions, one of the things that we want to move into next is just developing the mirror for ourselves so we can tell our story. We have to really look at ourselves and develop self-awareness and perception. Those initial questions begin the process. And self-awareness is really a lifelong journey. And for the purpose of building a brand, we want to focus on what we can know and define now. Again, it's really important to remember that this will evolve over time. You're not going to be in the farmer's market forever. You're going to be at Whole Foods. You're going to be at Costco. You can do all these things. And so that means you're going to need to edit and update this over time as perceptions evolved, as needs evolved. And so now, as we're moving away from locating ourselves directly in the process of creating the brand, now we move into perceptive questions, awareness questions. Who am I? How do others see me? And how do others see my brand? What values do I cherish? So the mirror, and again, this is the question, who am I? So developing the who am I for both the founder and then moving into the next questions with more of a focus on the business. Again, as a founder, these questions are particularly important if you are wanting to put yourself at the forefront of the brand and really involve yourself in the narrative of the brand in a more big way. With Love Locks, again, we have a big founder focus here. So a lot of these are related to the founder. And then if you are not wanting to be founder focused, you can shift these questions of who am I to be more centered around the brand. Like, who is the brand and how is it showing up? And so, for example, here you can see just more about Chef Nicole. And she is a talented plant-based celebrity chef with a deep sense of empathy towards human beings, wildlife, and ecosystem. She's very well educated and experienced. She also is philanthropic. She has a nonprofit where she feeds the houseless community of Los Angeles. Yeah, and just working through these different questions, you'll see on your document as well, there are more questions related to this. And I just want you to start thinking like, who am I? How am I going to show up in the brand? And what's important for me to express about my history, my passions, my drives, like my inspirations. So just putting your mind there. Okay. So the who am I is more about you having this conversation with yourself. Now, in this part of the mirroring exercise, what I'm really wanting you to do is put your, self in the shoes of somebody else who's observing your brand. And so, and put yourself in the shoes of somebody who's observing you. So how do others see me? Like, what's aligned with how others see me versus how I see myself? And so just writing that out and giving yourself some perception of how you're observed from the outside. I personally can say that plenty of people see me very differently from how I see myself. And, there's plenty of things that from a professional standpoint, people definitely wouldn't see about me. And so it's just important to keep that in mind. The other portion is really about you. And this is all about like, how are you presenting yourself to the public as a founder? And then how are you presenting your brand to the public as a brand? What's important for people to know? So again, this is just the example of Love Locks, talking about, what people see about Chef Nicole and what people see about the brand. And this is all kind of like the forward-facing observations that people will see. Okay, and so moving into the different parts of the mirror where we talk about values, this is just a little bit of a brainstorming section for you. Again, like really wanting to get a few values that are really important for you out here and onto paper. Again, what is it? Like with Nicole, quality of life for herself and others, nourishing, delicious food. Like she doesn't want people to compromise taste and quality for plant-based food. And then she also believes that plant-based food is healing, as well as equality, responsibility, eco and mindful luxury. These are all just the key points that she chose that we helped her work through to really define her brand. So as you know, or as you may not know, values are something that's incredibly important when you're developing the story. Like, how are you going to showcase your values in the story of your brand? That part is incredibly important because a lot of times your target audience, your consumers, are going to be attached to you because of your values. And, what values you're portraying in your story, what values you're even portraying in your colors and like your fonts, all of these things need to be a full picture. So this is why we do this deep dive in this way from a couple of different angles here. And so next we go into the gift. And so again, thinking about what is my contribution to the world. For this, I want you to really think about from, the perspective of you. Again, this is just the Love Locks example over here. You know, from the perspective of you, you know, what gifts are you here to share? And what gifts does your product share? What gifts does your brand share? Just get into the mind space of thinking from both of those points. And again, if the brand focus is more on you, make the gifts and most of these other sections more of a focus on you. This is the decision you have to make as you're building. So just keeping that in mind. Thinking about your contribution to the world again, like what are your important contributions? Are they related to ethics? Are they related to health? Are they related to, you know, creativity? Are you trying to inspire other people? And then how? What is that does that for you? Okay. So we have basically 4 sections and how to create your brand story. So I'm going to pause with every section and just check in and see, does anybody have any questions so far? Awesome. Okay. So next, we're going to go into connecting with your audience. Again, why this is important. We touched on this in a few different parts, you know, of the last section. But if you don't know your audience, your story can really easily miss its intended mark. So if you're writing your story without your audience in mind, I feel like you're most likely going to have to redo this. And I see brands do this all the time. So getting in the mindset of your audience, getting in the mindset of who you're telling the story to before you write the story is a very helpful second step after you locate yourself in the process of building your business. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is the waiting room. And we're going to explore with empathy to create connection. The question with the waiting room is, how can you get intimate with the people who are waiting to hear from you in order to tell a story that resonates with them? And how can you define your target audience and who is ready and waiting for your gift? So just to clarify a little bit further, again, the waiting room is like the people that are just chomping at the bit, ready and excited, waiting for your product or service. You know, these are the people that need the vegan carrot lox. Who are they? And so when creating Nicole's product, for example, one of the reasons she actually first created this recipe and made this was because, you know, she was working on set as a makeup designer. She was doing things basically like working between being a chef for, you know, celebrities and also, you know, doing makeup design or like makeup art. And somebody who she was working on set with was pregnant and they could not eat the like bagels and lox that they were doing for like the brunch that they would do every week. And she was really bummed. And so Nicole figured out this recipe and made this for her. And so thinking about that, you know, people who can't eat mercury, like pregnant women, those are some of the people that are in the waiting room, right? People who are, you know, vegan are people who are in the waiting room. People who are wanting to have, you know, a more whole food plant-based experience are in the waiting room. And so that's kind of just simple things that you can start to say, like contextually, who's interested in this product? What are they waiting for and why? And so this kind of just begins to develop the prompts for how we create the audience, right? So now we have like a generalization of who's in the waiting room and who is interested in this product. And then we can go a little bit deeper. So we won't go too deep into this part. This is important for marketing, and it's important to have a generalized idea for your brand storytelling, but we don't need to go too deep. I suggest that you take some time and think about this as well if you haven't already. But the waiting room basically transitions really directly into your target markets and then your demographic profile. So for example, with Lovelocks, you know, once you have an idea of who's in your waiting room, again, so we have pregnant women, we have health conscious foodies, we have, you know, people who are eating plant-based, people who want whole food plant-based. We can kind of define based on that by doing a little bit more research, you know, what is the more clear profile in terms of the demographic. And then we can go into understanding what are their pain points. You know, where do you find them? Where are they going to be shopping? You know, these people, what are their desires, right? And so some of their pain points, just think about it. Put yourself in their shoes. Think about, what kind of income bracket they're having based on like, what kind of product you're making. Are you making a luxury product? Are you making an accessible product? Just all of these things need to be something that you take into consideration as you are creating the story. Again, because thinking about the more that you develop this, right? For example, in Nicole's case, she wants to have approachable luxury. Like she wants it to be not a cheap product. It's not going to be like a bargain product, but it's also not going to be something that's incredibly out of reach. It's something that is approachable luxury, but we want to target people who are, high achieving, health conscious, and that have, a want for something that replaces salmon, right? And so going into the details and like the desires and kind of where you find these people will really help you understand how you're telling a story. If you're, for example, doing something that's more of like a product that is less expensive, that's kind of for your everyday person, and you're wanting to make it mass produced and accessible to everyone at the lowest price point possible, it's a very different story that you're probably going to tell. And it's something that tone and that like energy of the story will shift based on the audience. So moving into section 3, any questions about the audiences and development of the audiences? No? All right. You ladies are so quiet today. I'm here for it if you have questions. Just letting you know. Don't be shy, please. Okay. So now that we've completed the legwork in parts 1 and 2, we can move into positioning and messaging and how to really define your brand story. I know for a brand storytelling workshop, we're just getting into the brand storytelling now, but I just can't stress enough to you how important it is to really work through and think through those other products before you even put, or those other parts of the, journey before you put pen to paper. This really allows you to build a compelling brand story and to create framework that is just intelligent and connective to the people that you need to be connecting with. Okay, so first we're going to talk about brand alignment. So you have the 4 V's that really create the heart and soul of your brand. So you have vision, voice, values, and visuals. We'll do a little bit of a discussion around visuals, just because I think it's important to understand how the visual aspects tie into the brand storytelling as well. But for this purpose, or for the purpose of this class, we're going to talk more about the vision, voice, and values, since this is more focused on the written portion. So vision, voice, and values, what does that mean? So for example, moving back into our Love Locks space here, the vision is really about raising awareness for what's happening in the ocean with the salmon and being a vehicle to support sustainability and sustainable lifestyles that people enjoy. The voice is tied into Nicole. So think about, Nicole is a very glamorous, very kind, very welcoming person. And she really is here for a lot of ethical and environmental reasons. And the voice is something that really echoes that kind of whimsical, poetic, and expressive, welcoming tone that she has. So how do you think about yourself as a founder and think about how your voice for your brand is being developed? Kind of again, now that you've mapped yourself, now that you've mapped your audience, how can you most portray your voice in order to really authentically communicate to your audience in a consistent way? What does that look like? And then your values. So being grounded in the values that you create are really going to help steer your direction and really create aligned decisions. So going back to some of the other things we've talked about, your values are really based around like your gift, what you're wanting to bring into the world, you as a founder, as well as you as a brand, thinking about where the confluence of what you want as a founder to put into the world, also thinking about your guiding light, how does that tie into what your target audience needs, and how do you portray that? What does that look like for you? So for Nicole, it's quality of life, nourishing, delicious, beautiful food, shared healing experiences, quality around responsibility, and then eco-mindful luxury. And so now that you work through these first three over here, which are more primarily to, again, understand and map the written portion, the inner portion, we would move into visuals. So how, when you're thinking about the vision, voice, and values of your company, do you express that through visuals? It's really interesting to see brands sometimes that are completely disconnected in their storytelling from their visuals. You have something that's meant to be a brand for everyday people, be very approachable, and instead they have more minimalistic, harsh, like branding. It's just very, it can be discordant. And so really thinking about, for example, when we're talking about our vision, our voice, and our values here have a lot of really soft words, have a lot of really spacious, kind, nostalgia, and gentleness in them. Like, we're here for a purpose, we're here for a vision. So for that, keeping that in mind, our visuals will always be linked to those kind of key threads throughout the vision, voice, and values. So one thing I want to touch on too is mission versus vision. So mission is something that you also need to define for your brand. And so a lot of times people get confused about what is mission versus vision. And so for me, when I think about the mission versus the mission is what you're doing. It needs to be something like creating a whole food plant-based alternative to smoked salmon lox. Very clear, very concise. You want to be able to narrow down and know your mission statement. This should just be like a statement that you can make that summarizes what your brand is doing. And then when you talk about vision, the vision is more like the aspiration. So you want to really know both and know the differentiation for both. The vision is like, what is the aspiration that we are creating through our mission? How is the vision, created around the mission? The mission is like the center point of what we're doing to achieve the vision. So with the vision, we're raising awareness about, what's actually happening in the ocean with the salmon. We're being a vehicle for people to choose sustainability and be able to enjoy, to maintain a sustainable lifestyle that they also enjoy, right? So this is more aspirational versus like, what's the nuts and bolts of we're doing, which is the mission. And so when we're creating a standout brand, now that we have reviewed the 4 V's, it's time to flush them out just a little bit further. So here, to create a standout brand, we have to work even more through our value proposition. We have the value statement, and now that goes further into developing what the value proposition is, what the positioning statement is, and the key points of difference. So for Lovelock's, the value proposition is just helping people understand why we created this delicious vegan carrot lox, and how it has the same taste, texture, and nutritional profile as salmon in terms of the omega-3s. So it's really important to highlight in your value proposition, what is it that you are doing that creates value of equal or greater than your competition. Why did you create this? What is the value of this? And so having to sit with yourself and define that for yourself is a really key part of your story. And then the value proposition ties directly into your positioning statement. So where the value proposition talks about like the value of the product as it is, like what is it bringing to the market, the positioning statement is where is it positioned in the market. So like, who is it sitting next to? and what differentiates it as a standout as it's sitting next to these products. And so again, for Nicole, this is the only plant-based salmon that covers literally all the bases for foodies and for conscious consumers who enjoy delicious and nutritious food. When we think about it, what's not written here is, for example, Lovelock's, also uses upcycled carrots, recycled packaging. It's really living in its values, right? So how can you talk about that? How can we get into that? And so that kind of trickles down into the key choices or key points of difference. The key points of difference you want to develop as the bullet points that essentially help your target audience know why you are the best choice for them as soon as you possibly can. You want this to be easy. You want them to be able to digest this at a glance. It needs to be fast. So again, just thinking of ideally 3 key points of difference, what are they for your brand? For example, with Nicole, there's a patent pending technique that she has to create this really beautiful texture that's reminiscent. She also doesn't use liquid smoke. And again, it's clean, safe, and nutritious, no harmful additives, same omega profile, made with organic and sustainably sourced ingredients. And again, like upcycled packaging, for the responsible, ethical, and sustainable, upcycled packaging, upcycled carrots, as many ingredients as we can. We're making conscious choices with the brand. That's just a part of it. And so whatever you're doing there, think about what it is you're doing. And, as you're in the early stages of your business, something that is really important to consider is right now, people are willing to spend more money on products if they see that it has a marked impact on both themselves and the world. Like when we're working with plant-based products, I work with lots of plant-based products. And so when I work with plant-based products and people think that, they should put the animal advocacy or ethical portion of it forward, I generally advise against it. You can. I think you can still put something, in there about this in the branding. I think that is important. But I also think from a marketing standpoint and from a branding standpoint, people are much more responsive to understanding why this impacts them and why this impacts the world and then the animals in that order. And so it's important to think of it that way. Like when you're thinking about your key points of difference, what is it that people are getting out of this? What is the world getting out of this? And then any other ethical or, additionally sustainable claims. Those are all important things. And if you're just in the process of building your brand too, thinking about how you can create, different parts of your brand or business to be more sustainable so that you can charge more of a higher price for it so you can have a better environmental impact. This is also a key time to think about that too. And that should always feed into your story. It's really important to highlight that. I'll give you an example. I had a company that I was working with in India that are amazing female entrepreneurs. They are just, kicking butt over there. They've created their own factory. They have created a line of vegan cheeses. And, their brand story is very minimal. They didn't want to highlight themselves as founders, which again, it's okay. This is a personal choice. I think that, if you're a female founded team, you should definitely tell your story. But, they decided that's not the route they wanted to take. But then they also decided they really didn't want to talk about their sourcing for their products. And when they told me the story of their sourcing, I'm like, no, absolutely not. You need to do that. What they're doing is they have sustainability and tracing on every part of their supply chain. It is so hard to do that, right? They were able to essentially trace everything from, the farm to their factory. And they were working also with only female suppliers. And they had upcycled nuts that they were using, like upcycled watermelon seeds for one of their cheeses. And they weren't telling this story. I'm like, why? This is so cool. Like nobody's doing this. And they were just like, oh, we didn't really think of it like that. So I know often it's hard when you're writing your own story to not get humble and lost in your own story. But people want to hear these things and people want to know about what you're doing that sets you apart. They want to know about what you're doing that's, good for the world. These are really, really great talking points. So cool. I see we have a question. Go for it, Jody.
Couldn't find my unmute. Okay, my question is regarding what you were saying about your own personal story and so on and so forth, and how hard it is as a founder to say that story. Do you find that it's, like I am a solopreneur, so I am I do everything myself. So my problem is hiring out.
Yeah.
But so what do you suggest in that respect to be able to tell your story without having the financial capabilities of hiring someone like you to help push that story forward?
Yeah. So this is why we're doing this exercise. I want you to be able to work through this exercise, and I want you to go through, the paper that we sent in the beginning, the homework. And I want you to really be able to get an understanding of all of these key points, because I totally understand how hard it is as a founder to tell your own story. And I think if you start to understand some of these key points, at the end of this exercise, what we're about to move into right now is how to actually craft the story and how to actually craft the written portions of, like the brand essentials, like the written brand essentials to, help people understand what they need to know about your brand. What are the things you need to do? Like founder bio, company bio, like how do you write that? What do you keep in mind? And like, just how to use the different portions of the things that we just talked about. Like, for example, the key points of difference. Those are things that are really great to use for advertising messages, like eco-friendly and luxurious. That's something that we'll say for lug locks. And, it's just how do you define those things that people want to hear as bullet points? How can you use them as advertising messages? How do you develop a story around you and around the brand and around what's important for the brand? This is kind of what we'll go into next. But, all of these things, there's different frameworks and different ways to do this. I know from my own personal experience, I had been a branding and marketing professional for years. And when I had to do my own brand, I was just like, oh, I hate this so much. um, but I knew I had to do it because I wanted to have that experience so I could even more deeply understand, when I'm working with founders and when I'm working with, companies. And so it's really hard, but by working through this framework, you're going to start to understand like who you're talking to and why and how you should tell your story. And if you really just, you're still digging into it and you don't have the writing skills, capability, time, whatever it is to fully write this story, at least if you have all of these critical questions answered and you want to hire a copywriter, it's going to be a little bit cheaper than just working with like a full branding team and full branding professional. So does that answer your question, Jody?
That's exactly what I was saying, because I've done all this stuff, but it's getting to just to the bite instead of the whole cookie,
Mhm.
I had to write a bio this weekend for myself and my brand. And so I wrote it, and I am not good. That's not my strength, is words. So I literally put it in Chat GPT to take it down to a bite size instead of a whole cookie. And I didn't love it, but I needed it. So it was like I had to push the needle forward. And
Yeah.
I'd asked friends for help, and everyone's busy. So
Mhm.
it's kind of a rock and a hard place.
Totally. Well, and thank God for ChatGPT. Like, there are so many cool tools right now that are coming up that, like, it's an interesting time to be in branding and marketing because the game is shifting for us too, and having to, like, basically become educators and help people understand how they can, do these things on their own because the economy is not great. And then there's all these AI tools. So it's like, how do we redefine our value as branding and marketing professionals? It's an interesting place to be. But I feel like ChatGPT is a super great resource too if you're stuck with brand copywriting. I use it all the time. I do like small projects for friends and people, and I just use ChatGPT prompts. You can go down a rabbit hole on Instagram or TikTok and like look up ChatGPT branding hacks. And like you can think about what different parts of the brand story that ChatGPT can help you with and why. And basically, you can go through a process with ChatGPT where you have it ask you all of this stuff about your brand. And so all these things that we're talking about in the beginning, the questions are actually, interestingly enough, similar to some of the things that ChatGPT will ask you. And once ChatGPT has a feel for all of these things, like who's your audience, like, what is your product, like it will help you write branding and narratives. And I will go through that and I will do that and be like, ChatGPT, give me blog topics. It's actually pretty crazy how helpful and spot on it is. And even if it's not spot on, a lot of times it can at least give you inspiration for something that you would like to talk about, but maybe phrase differently, or something that like, no, this isn't a line for me. I want to phrase it like this. So it's a pretty useful tool. One thing I noticed that I didn't give you for the homework is kind of like a short list of what different brands, what different brand writing items you could use just for helping to define your branding. So like founder bio, like long bio, first person, long bio, third person, short bio, like brand summary. I'll basically create a sheet that like these are all like the standard copywriting needs for brands that you'll need for marketing communications. And that can be a cheat sheet that you can use to work through all these prompts first that I gave you on the questionnaire, and then to take over into ChatGPT and just create these different, if you don't feel like writing it yourself, which I always recommend people try first because it's really helpful to do that. But yeah, if you get stuck and you just can't feel like you can do it, then you can fill out like all of these questions with ChatGPT, and then bit by bit, just go through and work through these different things that you need. Because those will all be really helpful for marketing in the future, for just sending out info about your product. And then if you hire contractors too, and you have all of these things already created, it's not going to be like such a lengthy or expensive process of editing because they already have all the basic information there for your brand. Does that make sense?
Totally. What was the prompt that you went down Instagram to find the ChatGPT brand services? Was there like a specific hashtag for prompts, or?
I can't remember. I feel like it's ChatGPT hacks, but I can't remember it's ChatGPT branding hacks. I'll try to find a link for you guys by the next class, just so you can take a look at those, because they're super fun and they're super helpful. And again, they're very tied into some of the things that like we as professional branders and marketers do. Like ChatGPT is a really great tool for entrepreneurs. It's pretty exciting. So yeah.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to say like, I'll say, write it in the tone of Good Vibes Cookie Co brand, and it will literally use
Exactly.
that I use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. It just asks you a bunch of questions and then it can really help you understand the tone. But this is the thing to keep in mind. If you don't understand your tone, you don't understand your values and your target audience and all these things that we just talked about, even ChatGPT is not going to help you write as compelling of a story. So that's why we go through, like, that's why this order, some of those things may seem like, even some of you may be asking, how are these connected to writing my brand story? But I promise you they really are. And like the deeper understanding you have of all those topics, the more compelling your brand story is going to be. Because if you don't know who you're reaching out to and why, and you're telling, your brand story, like I'm writing my brand story to 50-plus-year-old white businessmen, it's going to hit very differently than like a product that was actually, made for, let's say, women in their like late 20s to early 30s, So you have to have a deep understanding of that and like how you're conveying the tone and the messaging, your voice to connect with the audience, and where you're really at in your life cycle. So
Yeah, 1000%. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
yeah, absolutely. Okay. So next we will move into crafting the brand story. So one of the next things that we want to do after we've answered all those other questions, we really want to think about incorporating all those things that we just learned, all those things that we just wrote out for ourselves, and think about how do we humanize our business to connect with our target audience. How can we, create the brand purpose using our 4 V's? And how can we create the customer as a hero? So what does that mean? So when the customers are the hero in the journey, we really want the customer to be engaged in the product. We want the customer to find value in the product. How can we make them the hero and the brand is their guide, embodying the same values and traits to really create that relatability with the customer? So defining further and going into that, we want to really think about what conflicts and challenges. We want to, think about how these conflicts and challenges impact our customer as we are, offering them this product. Like, what conflicts and challenges are they facing? How are they similar to their pain points? And how can we create a little bit of conflict and challenge in creating our brand, either telling a story as a founder or telling a story of why the product was created. Like, for example, the ladies who were creating that vegan cheese brand, I was really sad when they didn't want to tell their story. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about their story, just as a context. One of them had really serious like stomach issues, like Crohn's disease, and wanted to figure out how to create something that was whole food, plant-based, affordable, and used, again, upcycled ingredients. And so this is what she created. She created this thing essentially first to heal her gut, working with like local vendors. And then she began, giving it to, or like producing it on a mass level. And it was really about, her healing journey first. So how do you bring that like understanding of the conflicts and challenges that you faced that led you to start this business to the customer? How do you do that in a way that leaves the story open and leaves them wanting to read and learn more about why this product is going to be amazing for them? Why are they buying into your story? And so, again, after we go through the conflicts and challenges, really finding the resolution and transformation, right? So for her name is Shreya. She, had transformation of her health. She lost a lot of weight. Her skin was very like radiant and shiny, where she had always had like a problem with acne before. She realized so much of this came into her gut, or it came from her gut and having like, a disharmonious like gut biome, because a lot of the dairy in India was also not very, it's not very well made. And so she created this, whole transition for herself and shared her journey. And, her health improved, her wellness improved. And so through that, creating that emotional connection of seeing, what was the conflict, what was the transformation and resolution, and then building that emotional connection to that story. And so once you built that emotional connection to that story, you've invoked joy, empathy, alignment, and you forged like a deeper bond with the customers through your struggle. And so then once you have created that emotional connection and had them, interested and invested in your story, you want to create a call to action. So whatever that is, in some cases, for example, you might be pitching to investors. So what's the call to action for them? Why are they buying into this? What is it that they are wanting to engage with? Or if you're doing a pitch for customers, a story for customers, the tone of the story will be really different. So thinking about, again, back into the audience discussion we had before, who it is that you're targeting. And those two different scenarios will have a little bit of a different spin on the story. But once you nail the core brand story type, or core brand storytelling, that will be really easy to shift between those two different narratives and people, because you have a deep understanding of who your brand is, what its purpose is, who your customer is, and what your challenges are, and everything, what the whole brand journey was. So back into the founder story. Again, this is just more or less relevant to you based on how involved you want to be in the storytelling of your brand. But the idea here is to inspire and relate to your audience as you're writing about yourself. What is your background? What is your inspiration? What challenges and sacrifices did you make in order to do this? What are your personal values and mission? What is your turning point? What really shaped the brand direction? And then what is the customer impact that you're so excited to see? Like, how does your brand impact customers? Why are you so excited to do this? Like, people don't want to see founders that are super bummed out. Like, we want to see people who are excited and bought into their own product, right? If you're not bought into your own product, why is somebody else going to be? That's a specifically important point for investors. I've seen people, with mediocre pitches, but who are so involved and excited and invested in their product, secure plenty of funding, versus people who are not really bought into their product, even if they had a more like detail-oriented business plan. Like, they couldn't pitch it, they couldn't tell their story. And I've seen them get less money in general. Like, it's really all about how you are telling your story. If you market, like there's studies that like people see and observe things differently based on like what you tell them and how the product looks, right? Even if it's the same product, somebody will like the product more if it's presented nicely from a storytelling standpoint and from a visual standpoint versus something that's bland and uninteresting, even if it's literally the same exact thing. So that's something to keep in mind. And a founder can often be that differentiator for people, you know, on top of the written storytelling, on top of the brand, you as a founder, your story and how you show up can be super important. And so again, yeah, it's important to show up with authenticity and connection and really try to find a genuine way of making that connection to your audience in your story. How are the people that are buying your product to you? Thinking about that is really critical. And so there's a couple of different storytelling strategies here as well. So you can think about how you would like to tell your story just based on these different storytelling strategies. You can use the hero's journey, again, where you're somebody like Shreya, who is set up kind of against the odds and, you know, grows and has confrontations and, you know, has really great connections where she gets all these amazing sourcings and creates this incredible product. You can make it more like dramatic. You can set up the story as a 3-act structure, you know, with confrontation, resolution, and just creating like a chronological dialogue. Then you can also do a Freytag pyramid, which this is more like something that's dramatic. Like if you had a really big life-changing event that allowed you to step into this space of entrepreneurship and just thinking about how you expose the problem, you dive into the action, you create a climax and then a decline, a resolution, and then a little bit more of a pickup, building tension, resolving conflicts. These are just different strategies in how you can dive into storytelling to make it more exciting. So, okay, that is the core part of the storytelling portion. And next, we're going to go into the personality and a little bit of art direction, which will help you in also defining the story. And so I wanted to just pause there as we move into this next session and see if we have any other questions. I see some stuff in the chat, so I'm going to pop that open. Okay, cool. Any other questions?
I have a quick question.
Yes, tell me.
So what if you don't have like this super inspirational story? Like your examples are of people that, you know, have wanted to develop sustainability, help the planet, help people with health issues, different things. Our kind of generalized story is at the beginning of COVID, we moved from Ohio to LA. We didn't realize at the time that COVID was going to be like this extended pandemic that it was. In the meantime, I developed autoimmune issues. So my husband and he discovered freeze-dried candy, but he couldn't find it locally. So as well, I've got the restaurant management background, but I can't do that anymore. So we bought a freeze dry machine and started selling freeze dried candy. But it's not like this big inspirational, we started it to save the planet kind of thing. So how do you tell a very simple story like that? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just want to tell you that like you don't also have to save the planet like by saving the whales like Nicole is doing. You're still creating something that helps people like you. So I just want to just pause for a moment and remind you that this is your hero's journey. And so
Okay.
yeah, even if you don't see it, you know, you're creating something for somebody else like you who has a experience where like this is something they need to have something that they're missing, right? And so I want you to think about it that you will be an inspiration because do you know what I saw some people doing during the pandemic? I saw some people getting drunk and drinking vodka and doing nothing. And
Right.
I saw some people getting super fit and you know, you decided to start a company. So just allow yourself to soak in that inspiration and realize that that's actually not minimal. you did something together with your partner. You built something during the pandemic, during a time of challenge, because you saw a need for yourself and realized that other people were going to have that need too, you know? And so just
Even though
thinking about,
it's like freeze-dried candy. It's like, it's not this
right.
big inspirational new invention kind of thing. We just, we had my husband is a candy fanatic.
Mhm.
I needed something where I could kind of use my customer service background
Mhm.
just in a different way. And, just to kind of bond with our community, get to know our new community.
Mhm.
So we just kind of picked freeze-dried candy, but there wasn't like this big inspirational reason behind it. So when it comes to this kind of stuff, I always get a little stumped because it's like, we changed, we moved across the country, couldn't go back to our fabulous jobs, so we're going for it, which I think a lot of people did during the pandemic. They
Right.
realized they didn't want that consume your whole life corporate careers anymore, but is that really a story behind your brand?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
that is. And this is one thing I really want to just remind you is that like this is a story and like it's hard as an entrepreneur to be like, hey, this is my story. It's actually a big deal to somebody. Even if I feel like humble about it, it's still the story of how your brand was made. And again, like I said, people were literally sitting there doing like the drink vodka and push-ups challenge, and you decided to create a company. Like just don't
Okay.
underplay the value of what you did. I think especially, I can say this to this group, especially as women entrepreneurs, it's hard for us to sometimes stand in our value and say, hey, I did this. Like, don't underplay it. It's actually not easy to start a company. It's impressive to start a company and to like do this. It sounds like your story is around wanting to create community, and wanting to take care of yourself and wanting to, prioritize having something that satisfied a need, that you were missing because you have an autoimmune disease. And this is what I'm saying. It doesn't have to be more dramatic. If there's ways that you want to find like to get more into sustainability, you can always evolve that with the brand over time. But like it doesn't have to start out that way. I think it's always good to have a mission and purpose-driven element to the brand. But for me, I see that there is there already, and you can always add more things. But just be mindful to not underplay these things too. I know it's hard when we're talking about ourselves to be humble and still develop our own stories sometimes. But like I also want you to just be like take a moment and be an appreciation of what you did and like allow it to come forward. I see this with women entrepreneurs, especially like we really tend to downplay the things that we do. And, unfortunately, I don't see men do the same thing as often. And sometimes with even less going on, it's just something that is like indicative to how we are, brought into this world. Right. And we need to just change that narrative a little bit. We need to speak positively about ourselves and not be afraid to speak up and say, yeah, this is what I did. It's awesome. It might not be saving whales, but it's for people like me. That's the thing. Like it's okay. That's great. That's still a great story.
Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Maybelline, did you have another question too? I saw that you popped in for a second.
Yes, it was not a question. It was just more a comment to Corinne's comment actually, and you already addressed it. It was about her creating community. It came out of her need of creating a community. So I think that's her story over there.
Yeah.
Another thing is Corinne. I know that your brand is attached to some work with a nonprofit that you guys want to develop that for children's, like to provide. I don't remember exactly what it is on the top of my mind, but you guys have like already some social work attached to it. So it doesn't have to be like saving the whales, as Jennifer said, but you guys have something in it. It is just in a fun way. It can be.
Right. Okay, so kind of go with the trying to establish ourselves in our new community angle.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the charity you're working with, again, it doesn't have to be like, that's still important. That's still the ethical component that I want you to think about. And, you know, if people aren't doing something like that right now, you can always add that in later and think about what, like, make it natural, right? Like what's tied into your brand, you know, like what do you want to contribute to, right? Like there's plenty of different charities out there that you can also like offer a percentage of contribution to. Not only is that good for marketing and branding, but that's good for tax write-offs. So just think about that. It's always something to consider, but it sounds like you're already doing a lot. So just be an appreciation of yourself. You know, you're not like John Smith over there creating another White Claw and being not humble about it. You're being very humble about like creating something that does seem like it has a couple of different both health and social impacts that are available for people. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you.
Of course. Okay. So what's next? So personality and art direction, the expression of your brand. So now that we've dived into a storytelling framework, we've understood ourselves and our audience. Now we're going to think about how the brand expresses, which is also really important. And how it expresses internally and externally with writing and with visuals are very tied together. So I really wanted to do just a short piece about this before we wrap up, so you can think about how this all connects. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with Jungian archetypes, but we do this for branding as part of our branding exercises. And I love having people think about this for a variety of reasons. Again, because it just gives you a more clear context in how your brand expresses into the world. You know, right now we have some very like well-known brands on here. And I want you to think about for your brand, go take a Jungian archetype quiz for yourself, see what comes up. And then think about, you know, as a brand, you know, are you in alignment with the archetype of your company? If not, it's okay. But does it fall into like one of these subcategories, right? So are you wanting to leave a mark? Are you wanting to connect with others? Are you wanting to provide structure? You know, what is it that you're doing? You know, for example, Apple is the creator, right? Apple is a known leader in the industry. It's an innovator that everybody knows, right? Whereas like, you know, UNICEF, for example, is a caregiver. You know, they're providing services, they're providing structure. And then Hugo Boss is providing structure from like a position of like ruling control. Like the name says it all, like Boss by Hugo Boss, right? So just thinking about like, as you're creating your product, like how are you tying into all of these different parts of the human journey? This will help you give, again, deeper or gain deeper understanding into how you are expressing as a person, what you are trying to go after, how you are trying to, you know, leave a mark, how you're connecting to others. Just go into this and really just take a look. So for example, like it just helps you with understanding the mode of expression that's tied into your vision, values, and voice, especially the voice. And it really helps you to create an easy to follow path for your brand story with a simple and clear picture. And so this is, you know, Lovelock's personality, for example, and here's some additional storytelling prompts to think about. And those are listed on your homework sheet. And so for all of these different things, just thinking about the brand personality, again, tying that specifically into the voice, like how is the brand personality speaking to people? How is it tied into and inspired by the founder's personality, as well as the vision and values of the brand? You know, again, with Nicole, it's kind, compassionate, empathetic, nurturing, inclusive, and always providing a safe and trustworthy space for all creatures. It's sweet, playful, smart, and a Sigma type leader using gentle motivation and inspiring calls to action with playful and lighthearted approach. It's sophisticated and enjoys beauty. It's scrumptious, exactly, while remaining humble and generous and welcoming. So again, then the brand story prompts, like answering all of this and understanding and tying it into your archetype is a really fun way to really dive into your storytelling. So now that we've really deeply explored brand storytelling and all of the different like who, what, where's, why's of our brand and our audience, and we've dived into some storytelling frameworks, I just want to spend a couple of minutes before we go into Q&A, just talking about outer appearance. I think that something is really important just to create synergy between the brand and between, you know, the visual and written aspects of the brand. And sometimes I see people, again, I said this earlier, you know, who will have like a soft, nurturing brand and a soft, nurturing concept. And then all of a sudden their visuals are like loud, eclectic, and all over the place, or very minimal, like cold and clean, and it's just not connected. And so once you've dived into your archetype and how you want to tell your story as both a founder and person, you really need to get your brain juices going about what is, the visual representation of that. Because, when you're pitching and when you're, telling your story, people are also going to look at the visual aspect, and they're going to see that first. So how can that visual representation just be the first thing they see, and how can it be aligned with your story? What can you do in terms of like your color palette and your fonts to really create synergy there? So one of the things that I recommend, and again, this is also on your homework sheet, is to build a mood board of your brand and help yourself, like help you understand your brand from a visual standpoint as well. So you can also understand your story. Like, am I, building a brand? Like for me, when I built my personal brand, I was like, I am kind of like a funky offbeat person, and I like to be a little bit loud. I like to do, things that have like color. I like colorful things, right? How do I do that in a way that like builds trust with the people that I'm trying to connect with? Because not only do I do branding and marketing, I also do corporate executive work. There's different components to what I do. I do corporate executive work. I work with new and emerging food brands. It's just like, how do I hit all these points when I'm understanding who my different customers are, when my audience, and really get into, visually, what is a representation of me, but that also keeps them in mind. And this also helped me to dive deeper into my story. Like, how am I wanting to portray myself visually? How does that connect to my story? So I made different mood boards with different things that were aligned with what I'm doing. So if you're a product brand, do different types of product shots for products that are similar, that you enjoy the branding of. Get together a bunch of logos, get together fonts, and get together people shots. One of my friends and my colleagues, who is a designer, told me when I was building my personal brand, she said, you should do this for a product or a personal brand. Build a Pinterest board that has, if your brand had a fashion, like if your brand had its own fashion, what would it look like? And like when I was thinking about my brand has a lot of really beautiful, like in terms of the fashion, like just textures, colors. Like I like bright, soft colors. I like bright colors with soft textures, like lots of like silk and lots of like just different like velvets and things like that. I think because, I'm so immersed in the corporate world, I also want to find different ways to be playful and in my feminine, right? So thinking about that in terms of like, if your brand had fashion, what would it be like? If your brand was a house, what would its design look like? And then pulling together just some color palettes from Pinterest. Honestly, this is one of my favorite exercises. And for me, it helps me to tell the story, to get into the visual aspect a lot more. And then once you put together a couple of these different mood boards with the color palettes, you can really pull color palettes from your mood boards as well to create that solid visual framework along with the storytelling. And then the fonts can kind of come out of that too. Like, am I creating a retro kind of brand? Like, am I creating kind of like a loud, funky brand? What does that look like? And what do fonts look like that are, harmonious, but also kind of discordant at the same time? How do I continue to exercise like the things that I'm talking about in my story as a visualization? So it's just a super fun thing to do. And again, for me, content writing, I love content writing, but not everybody does. Some people are more visually oriented. And I think if you struggle with copywriting, getting into the visual aspect of your brand and just having this fun time to connect with it and make it like a visual story can also help you to get in the shoes of your target audience and experience the brand as somebody else would as well. So here's just an example of Lovelocks and the branding that we ended up doing for Lovelocks. Just these were the color palettes we started from, and we ended up kind of using very similar fonts to this one down here in B, and just kind of picking and choosing some of the fonts from these original color palette options. And so again, the fonts, just synchronizing that to the brand story. The fonts are very modern, very luxe, approachable, and also easy to read. We wanted it to look luxurious, but also approachable. And that's been something that's been a core narrative through all the things we've talked about here. I don't know why this isn't loading. I think this next one was just the mood board, but apparently it doesn't feel like coming through right now. So I'll pause there. And I will open it up for questions. Cool. I just saw Jody's comment. Yes, and super, super important to connect the brand colors to your voice. Like, I really noticed that there's so many people in the world of entrepreneurship that, you know, are working in areas that are not like their area of genius, right? Like, what is area of genius? Let's talk about that. Our area of genius is the thing that we love, that we are amazing at. You know, there's so many ways that we don't do that as entrepreneurs just out of necessity. And that's okay. But what that means is we need to find more ways to play in our areas of genius. Like, some people love copywriting, some people love design. And if we can play a little bit in design, in the visual aspect to connect to copywriting more deeply, I think those mood boards and like the font and color selection process really helps to find that connection. Like, it's kind of like almost a way of working backwards too, but like, again, working in something that inspires you. So cool. All right. Any other questions from you wonderful ladies? Go for it.
So the next section is Wednesday, right?
Yes.
So we'll take all your paperwork, we'll fill it out as best as we can. What else, is the idea, like, to get the most out of our time together? What else did you want from us to do?
Yeah, great question. So I would love for everybody to fill that sheet out to the best of their ability and come prepared with questions and come prepared with what your experience was of working through that sheet, where you feel blocked, any additional information you feel around challenges that are coming up in developing your brand narrative, anything that you want support and coaching on. With a group this size, everybody should have about 10 minutes. And so then we can go through and just have some feedback and coaching for everybody on what their process is, so you can get some hands-on advice and what you need support for.
This has been really awesome today. Like, I have tons of notes. I'm feeling it. So thank you.
Good, my pleasure. Super happy to be here and to support you ladies in your entrepreneurship. Yes.
Hi. Hi, I have a question. When you talk it about to the visual in the first of the class, so can you give me one little, like a simple sample how we can look the point in the process?
Yeah, let me pull up my Pinterest really quick since that visual didn't pull up. Hold on one second.
Okay.
Pinterest.com. Yeah, this is a super fun thing to do. Like, when one of the branding experts on my team first suggested we incorporate this, I just loved it. I hadn't done it this way before. And it's a really fast, efficient way to get these things together and to get it all kind of mapped out on your brain if you're a more visual person.
Right.
1 second.
Do you also suggest that we take that Pinterest and make it public and round it back as a part of the story? Or is that a private?
I mean, you can share it if you want. Like, if you're developing the brand story, like for like Instagram and things like that, just, you could share that part of your process, because it's a fun and visual experience for people if they're following along in like the trajectory of your brand. But more than anything, this is for you to understand exactly what is happening for you. Oh, hold on 1 second. Where did my Pinterest go? Okay, cool. So you can see this. So
Okay.
this is my personal Pinterest. But let's see what
Right.
my boards are. Okay.
Mhm.
Personal brand,
Okay.
design. I'm not going to show you my personal brand though. Where's
Okay.
Lovelocks? Lovelocks inspo. Okay. So for
Okay.
example, here is some of the
Oh,
Lovelocks
perfect.
inspiration in terms of like the
Alright.
pictures and the visual. Like how are we wanting this to be like
Mm-hmm.
pictured? How, like, what is
Right.
this styling like? What does all the colors look like? Like, you know, how
Yeah.
can we get people to buy into this vision, right?
Right.
And
Very
so,
visual. Yeah, looks really nice.
yeah, and for example, okay, here's another brand. This one is for a brand called Mimansa. And so here is Mimansa is a fabulous female entrepreneur and doctor who's creating an Ayurvedic
Yeah.
like telehealth project. And
Yeah.
so I really wanted her to help me understand. She wanted it to be
Mhm.
feminine and tied into Ayurveda and like health and wellness. And so I really wanted her to help me understand, you know, what color palettes, what does that mean for her
Right.
when she envisions doctor's office and femininity? Because, you know, when I think of doctor's office, I think of like sterility, you know, I think of sterile and boring, like white tones and awkward blues. And, you know, like
Right.
this was her helping me understand how she wanted to, you know, have these things viewed.
Visual.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, totally. And so, you know, she's not like creating face oils, but she really enjoyed like these different stylizations of like these supplement companies, these different
Right.
stylizations of like this different kind of advertising and photography, and like wanted this to be something that was incorporated into her brand. You know, she wanted it to be something where the brand looked like it was in movement, right? Like the
Right.
bodies were in movement, the people were in movement, they were
Mhm.
natural, they were healthy, they were like earthy, but also clean and organized, right? Like some kind of
Right.
like almost scientific element. And so this is a really
Mhm.
fun one to look at. Like I love these kind of pictures, right? It was such a fun process to create this with her. So
Okay, perfect.
cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see what else. Yeah, I think those are good to go through. Awesome. Okay, well, we only have a couple more minutes. Any other questions or anything anybody wants to ask me about something they're working on with their brands? Anything that will help you to dive more into your homework? Let me know. Cool.
Questions?
Yeah, I was going to say in that case, because I know we tend to be quiet, I would love to hear from everybody. We'll do this popcorn style. Just some thoughts or anything in closing about how you found this session and anything you'd like to get from the next one. Let's just do like a quick, like 1 to 2 sentence blurb, and we'll go around the room and just get everybody talking. And I'm going to choose Francois to start.
Hi. Yes, that was a lot of information, and I think it's going to be really useful to do the exercise. I feel like there's a lot of things that little things I've been thinking about before, but never as an ensemble like that, never as a complete overview of the brand storytelling. So it was really useful and a little bit overwhelming, to be honest, a little bit like,
Mhm.
wow, I have a lot of work to do, but it's exciting. So thank you. Thank you for that.
Pleasure. Thank you. And go ahead and popcorn it to somebody else.
Let's go with Lola.
Hi. Yes, it's kind of the same sentiment. It's just so nice to have everything broken down because I just think in general we're all so overwhelmed with everything, but everything is just starting from the basics and just, just having a starting point and then everything connects to the next thing. So it's nice to just because I feel like I can only speak for myself, but I have other, small business friends that we kind of we start a business and then we kind of figure everything else out like as we go. So it's just nice to like have it all laid out and be like, okay, let's start at one and kind of work backwards, but it all connects. So it's nice.
Totally. Cool.
Jody.
Hi.
I'm happy to see your face, Lola. I'm like, oh, name and face and brand. Nice to see you. I come from a branding, packaging, designing background. So no matter, I want to just say, like, to the whole group, even though I strategically know a lot of this stuff, how to implement it is another story. So it's my biggest obstacle is I have a brand, I have a voice, I have all the colors, and everything is clearly intuitively melding, but it's how to push the needle forward and how to concisely take it. So I guess my biggest thing that I want from next week is, say I write a 2 to 3 sentence like pitch or bio or whatever, and that's where I kind of want to focus on. So when I do meet people out in the streets, I could tell them my purpose, my brand, my name, and they're like, what, you know, like, and feel like the magic. So
Mhm.
that's where I'm at. I think that was the question.
Yes. Thank you.
I'm going to Corinne because I was feeling what you were saying about the purpose, and like a lot of people are like, oh, but you make a cookie, but it's wellness. And I see you there. I want you to know I feel you and like be you. So Corinne.
Thank you. We've worked on a story. We recently wrote one up with one of our advisors. So I kind of have that, as Maybelline touched on. We do eventually want to start working with a nonprofit called Ace for Change. We were introduced to it through another nonprofit that we had worked with. And we eventually want to work with this program that focuses on at-risk youth. Kids that don't have the best home life, they're getting involved with gangs, different things. Where we're from in Ohio, that's a very prevalent issue that my husband has experienced quite a bit. So because we are Black owned and women run, we want to kind of implement that into our story and find a way to work with this nonprofit and have an effect on the youth. However, we aren't there yet. So I'm kind of working on, like, how do I portray that in our story when we haven't quite gotten there yet? We don't have the funds, the means to get to that point as of right now, but we'd like to. So is it okay to touch on that without actually doing it right now? You know, we have our colors, you know, bright candy, but I kind of feel like our target audience can go multiple ways. When you think of candy, you think of kids, and they are all in, but we also have a lot of like nostalgic candies that can bring in the older generation, and they can experience the candies in new ways. So it's just kind of trying to narrow everything down, but I think we're getting there.
And that leaves us with Alina.
Ya. ¿Me puedes ayudar a traducirla? Sí. Ay, gracias. La pregunta que tengo para Jennifer es cuando ella habla de como darle un color como a la presentación de tu producto o de tu diseño. Yo siempre he tenido el enfoque, me gustan mucho los colores como el pink con gold. Y mi pregunta es, ¿eso no hace que me enfoque nomás como a la comunidad al área de las mujeres? O como que puedo ser más neutral para en un futuro aplicar diferentes colores como a mi bolsa del café?
So Jennifer, she's asking, that when it comes to the branding colors, she's tend to like the rose golds and all these feminine colors, and she's worried that if she decides for those colors, then her brand will only be perceived as a brand for only women. So you give you a little bit more background of her product. She is like she has coffee and grains, and she sells wholesales. So she's worried that by choosing like a really feminine color, which is the theme that she wants to go for, because that's what she likes, then she would be like missing out all these, let's say, masculine kind of like businessmen over there that precisely wouldn't go for a feminine color, kind of feminine.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that there's still a way to have a feminine feel to the brand and target masculine folks. It doesn't necessarily preclude them. Obviously, I think if it's super flowery and like covered in like, embroideries and doodles, it's going to be maybe a little bit off-putting for them and not going to be as eye-catching for them. But like, there's plenty of great coffee brands that have like some feminine colors incorporated, that have like soft feminine design that look approachable and like, again, soft, but also, are accessible, I think, to both men and women because they're eye-catching. So my question to you is, how can you make it feminine without making it overly so in a way that's still eye-catching for the masculine? Like one of my favorite coffee brands, like in terms of their packaging, is Counterculture Coffee. They're great. They're based in San Francisco. I actually worked with their founder way back in the day. Like they're all over the place now. They're awesome. And like their story is amazing. And so another example is, we work with a company called Difference Coffee, and we help them with their branding. And their branding is, again, all about like eco-friendly, like sustainable pods for like high-end luxury. So not only do you want to think about, who is your coffee for, like who are you selling to in terms of like, the different things? Like, are you going to sell to restaurants? Are you going to sell to local people? Are you going to sell D2C? If it's really going to be people focused, then you can get more specific in targeting women and then just developing your why and why you're targeting women. One thing that's important to know, I don't know if you've ever read Jenny Stolczewicz's book, which is about the future of food as female. Women are in charge of most purchasing decisions. And so it's actually okay in general to target women over men. So just keep that in your mind. And just think about your why. That's your why. Like, why are you selling to these people? Like, what channels are you selling to these people on? And really get into that, and then kind of decide the level of prioritization and the level of femininity that you want to create to still be creating that feminine brand for you as a feminine entrepreneur and your community. But then how are you creating that without creating like exclusivity? How can you use that femininity to create inclusivity and draw as well for more people? While still prioritizing your target audience. So.
All right. Thank you so much, Jennifer. It's very good opinion. Very important to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here for that. And Corinne, I just wanted to say to you also, the more you keep telling me you don't have a story, the more I'm like, what are you talking about? You're, like you have female like founders of color, like all these things. I just want to remind you ladies, like stand strong in your story, don't literally like, don't let like John Smith creating like that same old product, like tell his story with more enthusiasm than you're willing to tell your story, because your story is awesome. And you getting enthusiastic about your story and all the parts of it are what really sets it apart. So there's obviously a difference between being humble and, like telling like a good story, like, or not being humble and telling a good story, right? But like, I have full confidence that you can do that without being unhumble. And I know it's really hard. And there's a lot of fear for me as a woman that comes up around that. And that did come up for me around that when I was building my brand. But like, tell your story fearlessly, because somebody needs to hear it. It's so important.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. I think everybody.
Yeah, I was just gonna say thank you so much, Jennifer. We are just a little bit past time. Just a reminding everyone, we're gonna meet again on Wednesday to review the worksheet that Jennifer sent. I'm gonna send it also today with the recording, the PowerPoint. Jennifer, can you send it over so I can share it with them as well? And that's it, unless you have any final thoughts, Jennifer, before we go.
No, just thank you so much, everybody. I'm excited to hear your questions and hear more about your stories in our next session.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Ciao.
Ciao.